Hello, everyone. Today we are having a special audio discussion where we will discuss about the current wave of protests that are sweeping across Kenya. These protests have been triggered by controversial tax hikes, and the movement has evolved into a wider campaign for more accountable governance in the country. We have with us the director for South Asia at our firm, APAC Assistance, Bhargav Reddy. Then we have Sitati Wasilwa, who's a manager at the firm, and myself, Ramu C.M, who's a senior analyst. So let's cut to the chase. Sitati, as
Yes.
an insider, as an
Mm,
analyst, not just in terms of being an international relations scholar, but also in terms of a grassroots expert,
mm.
what do you see as the root cause of these protests?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the situation, the primary factor which triggered all these protests that you're seeing across the country is, the controversial 2024 finance bill, which proposed some stringent tax increases that members of the public felt would further increase the cost of living in the country. So that was the primary trigger factor that led to the protests. But what we are now seeing is the fact that the protests have evolved, not just from the grievances against the tax increases, but citizens are now calling for more political accountability as far as several, governance issues are concerned. Yeah.
All right. That was a good insight. Bhargav, at this juncture, do you have any of your own perspectives to add over here, or do you want to grill Sitati? Do you have kind of like questions? Do you want to be the devil's advocate over here?
Certainly. In fact, it's interesting that you said grill because that doesn't quite happen internally as often as I would like. Of course, on a lighter note. At the same time, so it's
Yes.
interesting that you point out corruption specifically. Now,
Mm,
how fair is that for the current dispensation to be asked to resign while corruption is a systemic long-term issue? Siddharthi, like you know the situation in Kenya much better. Now, do you see the corruption being rooted out just with one wave of protests? Will political accountability suddenly dawn on the political spectrum just because a few buses and the parliament was burned?
mm. I mean, at this juncture, it's really important to paint a broad picture of what all these grievances against corruption are concerned in the country. As you've mentioned, and you're right, corruption is a systemic issue, which has not only affected the current administration under President William Ruto, but I mean, it dates back to the first, independence, post-colonial government that we had soon after gaining independence as a country. But it even goes beyond that during the colonial era, when we had, the British colonial government in the country, which, I mean, based on historical records, engineered different forms of corruption. But the peculiarity that we are seeing with this administration is the fact that the cronies or the people close to the presidency are displaying all these opulent lifestyles. You are having politicians driving Gazlas, high top of the range vehicles, owning several of them, and registering, businesses to do business directly with the government. You're having the president's close associates organizing public fundraisers and distributing, a lot of money, which most of the citizens believe that those are just proceeds from financial resources stolen from the public coffers. Okay, so that opulent display of financial resources and wealth believed to be process of corruption in this era of social media in the country then has created a perception that this is perhaps one of Kenya's maybe the most corrupt government in Kenya's history. And just to back that up, the current administration during the political campaigns in 2022 going into the general elections did not at any single point mention that it was going to fight corruption. And for heaven's sake, the current president, William Ruto, is associated with lots of corruption scandals. I mean, even way before he became president, during his time as deputy president, during his time as a minister, during his time as a member of parliament, he was associated and even, prosecuted for being involved in different corruption scandals.
Sitati,
All right.
all right,
So-
Bhargav, yeah, please.
Now, it is fair enough to target those who are perceived as corrupt in the current cabinet, including the president himself.
Yeah.
However, when quote unquote, the so-called peaceful protest goes haywire, goes out of hand, where do you see the spark is? I mean, I understand there was a financial bill which was introduced that increased the taxes and people
Yeah.
came onto the streets. That's fair enough. But at the same time, when there's anarchy on the streets, how do you expect the police as well as the military to react to that? If they sit back, they are the culprit because of inaction. If they do come on the streets and control the protests, they become the criminals who attack the so-called peaceful protests despite burning buildings and buses and whatnot. And don't you think
Yeah.
protests which evolve into anarchy is counterproductive? Because I mean, you pointed out the standard of living, ability to afford certain basic necessities itself is in question. And if government needs to invest again to repair all of the damages done in the capital city itself, won't it really put pressure on the taxpayer themselves?
I mean, I want to respond, I mean, to those questions, the questions that which you've just put across. First of all, these protests, when they started, they were very peaceful, very peaceful. In fact, the Kenyan police has a very, it has a terrible record and history of, disrupting protests or causing, triggering violence when peaceful protests are going on. And I mean, the records are pretty clear on that. What has happened over time is the fact that the government, especially through politicians who are affiliated with the ruling coalition, have been sponsoring militias, to infiltrate the protests, cause violence, by destroying property, attacking other innocent civilians, with the main aim of branding the protesters as anarchists, as people who want to overthrow the government using violent means. So that is what has been happening. But I mean, anarchy, of course, cannot really engineer or promote democratic reforms. I mean, especially for a country like Kenya, which compared to its peers in Africa, is has made very positive democratic strides over the years, probably over the last 3 decades or so. But I think there have been concerns about the country's stability and security at large. But of course, from where I stand, I do not really think we are going to drift into a chaotic situation of society, the way I look how things are. So probably what lies going forward is the fact that we may see these protests, decreasing. In terms of how the frequency, we are going to see maybe a decrease in the frequency of these protests going forward. I look at it because the protesters who have been largely peaceful do not really want to be associated with violence as it stands. But that also means we are going to be having probably sporadic protests, spontaneously breaking out when least expected. But such kind of protests tend to be peaceful in this country, as shown by recent historical records. But of course, there's also a change of heart from the ruling coalition, including the presidency. that certain reforms need to be effected. So I think based on that, going forward, we may not see anarchy prevailing, but I think we are going to see probably a change of heart from the government to effect some of the issues raised as far as reforms are concerned.
Understood. But in terms of businesses,
Yep.
what can they expect? Chaos on the streets is never good for businesses. And it is hard not to point out the big businesses, the big showrooms, they have insurance, they have the financial muscle to weather such uh, short-term minor crises. However, the smaller businesses, how do you see this affecting multinationals as well as local businesses? Because it doesn't matter whether it is the US, India, or Kenya, when chaos in the streets affect business day to day, it's going to affect their revenue as well as damage their assets, which is not easy to recover.
Yeah, I mean, in the short term, if the protests are going to go on and they are infiltrated with, militias who are sponsored by politicians, then definitely for smaller businesses, in fact, I think would bear a larger cost or will be impacted the most if these protests are to go on because of the violence that would mostly arise from the demonstrations. But even far beyond that, for multinationals, I mean, multinationals still consider Kenya as one of the most strategic countries in Africa, and not just in the Eastern and Central African region. It goes beyond that, the entire continent. But of course, there are still concerns. And this for businesses can be looked either from a positive, perspective or from a negative point of view. Positively, businesses expect that once these protests subside, the government will have to be more accountable, and even corruption would decrease to a large extent, because corruption has been one of the biggest impediments, to multinationals doing businesses in Kenya. Issues to do with overtaxation under this administration has been prominent. So perhaps the multinationals can also be positive a little bit that once the reforms are initiated, especially on corruption, then it will even create a friendlier business environment for them. But of course, from a negative side of it is the fact that once the protests go on, then the country's credibility in terms of being a favorable investment destination, then there will be issues definitely on that. And you expect movements you expect volatile movements in the exchange rate, and such kind of issues, which will then definitely or directly affect the revenues and by the businesses, and even the general disruptions to the supply chains once the protests continue, especially if they continue being violent. Then you expect such kind of effects to arise.
Right. So with corruption in focus, it has to be said that Kenya is one of those countries which has immense potential in terms of growth in the medium to long term, especially when it has a population of 50 billion and a GDP of 100 billion plus. Now, the per capita income is not encouraging with below $2,000. However, with a clever balancing act and the corruption sorted out, Kenya holds immense potential given the natural resources, very balanced population if they get their act together in terms of overall planning into economic planning. I mean, at the same time, what is a major concern, which you rightly pointed out, directly affects corruption and public finances is the external debt, which is crossing $40 billion as we speak. And that is very much at the center of the new bills, what they were trying to pass. And apparently there is international pressure to basically increase taxes and ensure that their public finances are taken care of. Unfortunately, increasing taxes, whether it's Pakistan or Kenya, isn't going to be popular with the masses, and that basically comes back to the question of public order with protests. Now, I hate to be quite academic, but I need to underline the fact that the very semblance of withdrawal or weakness on part of the state basically gives a platform for anti-social and anti-national elements to show the hand. And this has been seen time and again. Very recently in Sri Lanka, and Sri Lanka was far more sedate compared to what we saw in India, in Delhi, and other parts of the world, even in the US for that matter, the Kenosha protests. So it is inevitable for any state to show a strong iron fist as and when the chaos breaks out, irrespective of the allegations of political parties playing a double game with fueled violent protests to silence them. So hopefully we'll look forward for greater stability. Ramu, so I will hand it back to you.
All right. Thanks a lot, Bhargav, for those really captivating questions. And Sitati, you have managed it pretty well. I mean, that was quite insightful. But just before concluding, if I may, okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but Ruto's election campaign, when he was voted to power in 2022, it somewhat oriented itself around a stereotypical image of of supporting the informal sector worker, promising them relief and support in their everyday economic lives. A sort of a bottom-up approach or wheelbarrow economics, so to say. Uh, so
Yeah.
yeah, but his decisions in office have undermined this image as the hustler in chief, the hustler nation concept.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
and the protests that have unfolded, since last month, kind of coalesce around this issue of taxes. And I
Yes.
also heard from, mostly my readings, because I'm not an expert like you, Asitati, that he has earned the nickname Zakayo, or what, I don't know which language that is, which
Zacchaeus.
basically, yeah,
Proof.
Zakayo, yeah, as the tax collector. So
Yes.
uh, rather dispassionately speaking, Sitati, do you have hope that there will be change, or is it something which is more of a far-fetched, optimistic scenario?
Well. I mean, those are interesting insights. I mean, intriguing as well. See, even from the branding of his name, I mean, to Zacchaeus, for Christians in the Bible, there's a story of Zacchaeus, the tax collector. So, of course, Zacchaeus is a Kiswahili name, of course, Kiswahili name for Zacchaeus, which is Zakayo. So, he's been branded as the tax collector because his administration in the last 2 or so years has been all about raising taxes in order to finance what Bhargav just mentioned. That was also very brilliant. The huge amount of public debt and things to do with, debt-related issues. And of course, I have to set the record straight that almost 70% of Kenya's, I mean, when you look at the debt to GDP ratio of Kenya, is almost at 70%, which tells you that a huge amount of the revenue that is collected by the Kenya Revenue Authority goes towards the repayment of public debt. But whether I'm optimistic or pessimistic, I mean, I look at this, we are going to have certain reforms, definitely. But I mean, I don't see a way in which the current government is going to pull out itself of the mud as far as the debt issue is concerned. For your information, I mean, Kenyans, especially on social media, when the protests broke out, they really pestered the International Monetary Fund, seeking it to react to the current situation in Kenya. But the IMF simply said, we are following the situation, but you see, at this point, the Kenyan government must honor its debt repayment obligations. They never minced their words on that. So the IMF insisted that the government needs to live within its means. It essentially agreed with what most Kenyans have been saying, that government officials are, they are on a spending spree. They don't really care whether the country is facing, debt concerns or what. So that aspect, if we are going to have government officials living within the means, not spending, unnecessarily and whatnot, then I believe that the future is still optimistic. But what has come out of this then is the fact that going forward, the level of political accountability, I can tell you for a fact, is going to improve in this country. But for the William Ruto administration, probably saying that the president is going to resign at this point is a little bit far-fetched in my opinion. I think maybe it may not necessarily happen. He may decide to probably sack his cabinet and maybe send packing his team of so many advisors. I wonder why he has such a large team, which is ineffective. But I think in the next 3 years, when we go in for the general elections in August 2027, I believe there are very high chances that William Ruto will be Kenya's first one-term president. For sure, that is in the cards. And why? The young people are disgusted, and majority, when you look at the dynamics of the Kenyan demographics, around 80% of the Kenyan population is made up of people below 35 years, with the country's median age at 19. So when these guys register as voters, then your guess is as good as mine when the elections come in 2027.
All right. Thank you so much for that very, cut to the throat analysis of the real picture. Yes, to all the listeners out there, thanks a lot for listening to this very scintillating discussion between the three of us rather patiently. Interested clients and customers may contact APAC assistants for bespoke risk assessments and even for recommendations and advice when it comes to scheduled travels or operations in Kenya. With that, I would like to thank both Sitati Wasilwa and Bhargav Reddy for enlightening us with this very good Q&A session in a sort of way. And thanks a lot, both of you. And thanks a lot to all the listeners out there. Thank you.